Hello everyone! In this video I want to talk about the pros and cons of a dropping elbow when hitting balls. It's obvious that we all want to have a high quality stroke. The question is, how do we get there? Let me show you some examples of professional players, some of them using a dropping elbow, some of them don't. So there's a lot of discussion going on, what's the better way to do it? Either to drop the elbow when you hit the cue ball or to have sort of a punch stroke. So in the first video I want to show you Fedor Gorst, known for his excellent and exquisite technique. Just look at his elbow, he's lining up the shot. Now he's a backswing and look at the dropping elbow. And the quality and the pure straightness of his stroke is just a beauty to watch. And if we look at it again in slow motion this time, you see that he's really focusing on having a straight elbow right now. The backswing is really, really long and the follow through is extremely long as well. Now let's have a look at another player, a female player right now, Jasmine Ocean. And if we watch her, you can see how beautiful her stroke is and how smooth she is going through the ball. Okay, now let's have a look to the group of people who are not using a follow-through stroke, but are still hugely successful. Now let's have a look at the current world champion, SVB. In this case I want to use an old video of him, but it's super cool because we can have a close-up look on how he is cueing. And what you see right here is that he's actually using sort of a punch stroke. Jeremy Jones famously detected this very early. And you can see that he's not really following through, but his cue tip again ends up on the felt of the table in this draw stroke situation, and the velocity on the cue seems to be very high, so that he's able to achieve the same quality. And here's another example of SVB pulling off an awesome draw stroke. It's almost 8 feet across the table, completely straight. Okay, now I want to show you what's been told to me when it comes to delivering the cue by professionals. So mainly, if we look a little bit into the past, and I'm not saying that's wrong, not at all folks, but in general it has been told to grip the cue somewhere like this, have an open or closed bridge on the other hand, etc. and that's about it. So, but if you look at the geometry, if I keep my elbow still, you see that if I move the cue right now, it has a lot of upwards and downwards movement and it's not really leveled. And if I use an open bridge and my wrist is not as easy and relaxed as mine right now, so if I grab the cue a little bit at the end, the cue even might go up. So even if you would use this technique like a punch stroke, you still would be required to have a loose wrist. If you don't have a loose wrist, this will happen, the cue will move up. Remember when I showed you the videos that at the end of each stroke, no matter if it's dropping elbow or not, the cue tip has almost been on the felt. The reason why this was possible is because the wrist was very loose, and that's very important for you to recognize. So I'm going down on the table, I leave my elbow up, but the problem is if I keep my wrist tight as well, it could look like this. And I think we all know how this is happening, and we've seen players doing this or doing it ourselves. But if I loose up my grip, so like this, so I'm really flexible here in my wrist right now, I can definitely leave my elbow up, but I'm still managing to keep the cue at the end of the stroke on the top of the felt, sort of, and I think that's a very, very important message to me, because for me at the beginning it was very difficult to drop my elbow. And when it comes to a dropping elbow, you should focus on 3 things. So the first thing you want to try to achieve with a dropping elbow, you want to avoid this movement of the cue. So actually, that's one of the reasons also for the dropping elbow, is to be able to have the cue leveled all the time. So if I have a backstroke and a forward stroke, in the best case scenario, the cue is always leveled. And of course, also the follow through is much, much longer. So the second point you should focus on is definitely dropping your elbow. And this causes me a lot of headache, of course, because to do this, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of time, but the benefits are obvious. You have a very long follow through, and the cue tip connects with the cue ball for a very long time, and this allows for a lot of quality in your stroke. And the third point, which is equally important as the other 2 points, is definitely your wrist. So you really need to have a very, very loose wrist, either in your backstroke or when you move the cue forward. And if you see how much I bend my wrist right here, and if I do it in slow motion, if I go backwards, you see how my arm opens and my fingers are almost completely open, and if I move the cue forward, it stays leveled, but now I really have to bend my wrist. So the wrist plays a very, very important role also in the acceleration of the cue. Because if you look at my wrist, if I'm stretched and I'm really trying to flip my wrist a little bit, if you see, I really try to flip it, and with this flipping movement and the dropping elbow, the cue stays almost leveled, and I accelerate the cue a lot. With the dropping elbow technique, a lot of joints are involved. So the shoulder joint is involved, the elbow joint is involved, and the wrist joint is involved. And everything has to work together very smoothly. If this is not working, or you have a bad day, you will definitely either miss cue or just miss the pot. Let me show you a simple exercise which has been shown to me by pros, how to perfect your dropping elbow technique. And what you need to focus on is mainly to keep your cue leveled. From the entire movement, from moving your cue to the back to moving your cue completely forward, the cue should be leveled. So that's actually what you would like to try to achieve in this exercise. The balls and the pocketing, that's just a tool for you to do it. The setup of the exercise is very simple. Just put a few balls. You can put more balls on the table on the first time and second time, whatever you want. The most important thing is to keep your cue leveled. So I try to go down to the shot. I try to open my backswing completely, and I really try to have a long forward stroke and getting my cue straight. Then I just move to the next ball and do the same. Keep my wrist very loose, completely loose, and I try to have a long forward stroke. It's not necessary to do it like this all the time, of course. This is exaggerated, but it just helps you to get a loose elbow and just to drop down. Once you master the follow through with the dropping elbow just with an object ball, try to add the cue ball into the equation. I put the cue ball on the table, some object balls. Of course, you can use much more, that's up to you. And now I just try to do the same thing, what I trained and practiced just with the object ball, but now just using the cue ball. And please don't judge me, I'm not a professional and I'm still working on my technique myself, but let's give it a try. So what you see right here, I'm focusing on having a straight shot, and I'm focusing on my follow through, but especially also on my backswing. And you see how easy the ball moved towards me. As mentioned before, to me, the most difficult thing is the backswing actually, because when I'm anxious, I always only swing like this. But with this action, with this short action, you can't get any quality. So to be able to really move backward like this, like a lot, and then really forward, that allows me to have a perfect straight shot with a perfect result. So I didn't need to put any force on the cue. I just let the cue move forward, and the result was obviously a very, very high quality shot. But don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not here to show off. Definitely not, because my technique is not good enough to show off. I just want to show with what I struggled with, so maybe you can do it better. Okay, let's try to do the same to achieve the same result, but this time with a punch stroke. Now I'm not going to try to drop my elbow. Now what I'm going to try to do is to have the same backswing, but not dropping my elbow. And you see, it's still possible. So I did not move my elbow, it's still possible. So it doesn't really mean that you need to drop your elbow. It's just definitely, I also think, a personal preference of what you want to use. And that's the advantage of sort of a punch stroke or keeping the elbow up, because with this technique, it's very likely that it's also going to work if you have a bad day. The advantage of a punch stroke, if you perfect it, is very obvious, because if you perfect it, you're very, very constant in your stroke delivery. So it's up to you what you want to use in your daily game or in your matches. Personally, I have to admit I'm a huge fan of dropping the elbow when you stroke the ball, but I'm definitely not a good one to perform it. I'm still struggling. I make a lot of mistakes when I try to do it. But anyway, I'm going to keep on working. I'm going to try to improve my stroke, and I really hope this video helped you a little bit to see how professionals work on their stroke, what they are focusing on. Yeah, and if you're interested, please also listen to my podcast. And I also got many more videos where I show you what I learned from professionals and how to implement it into your training regime. See you all in the next video. Have a great time. Play on.